You're going to open the file from the previous workshop, and it should be the one that's called last name, first name, 01IDA. And what you're going to do first is you're going to then go to File, Save As, and then press the arrow key to get to the end of the line. Press Delete, and then change the A to a B, and then click Save. And this will save your document and all the new changes that you've made to it. So this is the start of Workshop B InDesign. And in this tutorial, we're going to talk about how you can add a texture layer to your InDesign document, how you can rotate a text box, how you can rotate the whole spread using color swatches and using object styles. So here we go. So the first thing that I'll talk about is adding a texture layer, and this can create a fun background effect to your documents. The place that I like to locate texture files, you can find them in a lot of places on the internet, but one site I've found particularly useful is called vecteezy.com, and you can see what you should type into your menu bar in a web browser in order to get to that. And so then it'll take you to this page, and I've already typed in texture. You can type in any number of things to get it to give you different vector graphics. And if I haven't emphasized this enough in class, a vector graphic is a graphic that's made out of mathematical lines as opposed to just pixels, which is what Photoshop works in. So we are going to actually download this file and then open it into Adobe Illustrator, edit it a little bit, and then import it into InDesign. So I'm just going to pick one of the top ones here. You'd probably want to scroll around and find one that is visually interesting to you. So I'm going to click on this one, and then it should have a free download option. And sometimes you'll see these in websites like this. This is how they make money, basically, is getting you to download something that's not actually the file that you want. So you always want to watch out and make sure that you're downloading the correct thing and not downloading some random program like Media Player Pro. Alright, so we'll click on free download, and then it'll come up with this pop-up window, usually advertising something to you. Again, it's free, so they're trying to make money other ways. So I'll just close that out. And then if I'm in Google Chrome, I can actually see this file, and it should be a zip file that downloaded. It will also be located in your downloads folder. So if you go into Finder and click on downloads, then you should also see the file show up there, and it's a zip file. And since I like to see things on my desktop, I'm just going to click and drag it out on my desktop and then close this window out. And then I'm also going to close out my web browser. Okay, so now I have that zip file open here on my desktop, and I'm going to double click on it, which will then unzip it, and you'll notice that there's now a folder that's called that same thing. And if I click on that folder, I'll open it up, and I'll see a number of different file types. Okay, the kinds of file types, sometimes the ones you download will not have the right file type that you need. Preferably it will be an AI file, and then there are a few other file types that will work. Alright, let's just try opening this SVG file and see what happens. So what I did is I just clicked on it, and I'm dragging it down to Adobe Illustrator and letting go so that it opens it in Adobe Illustrator. And then that will take a few minutes. If you ever aren't seeing the vector points that are showing in the tutorial, then just try downloading a different texture and assume that the one that you had downloaded didn't have the right file types. So sometimes it's a little bit of trial and error until you can find the right thing. I'm going to place it into our document, and this works the same way that it worked when we placed a picture into our document. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to File, Place, Then we're going to navigate to that folder on our desktop or wherever you located it, preferably in your flash drive so that you will not lose the link. Because again, if you have things saved in multiple locations, it will lose the file and it will unlink, and then it will be pixelated and it won't really be linked, and you also have a hard time exporting it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that AI file because that's the best one. If AI is an option, use that. Alright, and so then I'm going to click open and it will load up my place cursor. And for this one I did not create a frame for it before I put it in. And so what I'm going to do for this is I'm actually going to drag out a frame box. And it only lets me create a frame box that's the right size for the file, which isn't actually what I want, but I'll show you how you can switch that in just a second. But the first thing, I want to actually be able to see how this document is going to look when things are properly ordered, right? Because right now it's covering up my title and it's covering up my image, and I actually want it underneath everything. So one way, and students have also found different ways to do it, but this is the one way that I recommend doing it. But if you find a quicker way that you like better, feel free to do that. So we're going to click up here in your right hand side where you see all your panels. Click on layers, all right? And then if you open up layer, you should then see that very top one is that 001 AI file, or whatever that AI file was called for you. And right now it's on top, and I need it to be on the bottom. So I'm actually going to hold my mouse down, so I click and hold. So I'm still holding the button, and I drag it until I see that little line is right under the last layer there, and I let go. And now you'll see that it snaps underneath everything. Okay, so now I can better see how that's all gonna lay out. All right, so I'm still, for whatever reason, in my type tool, but the tool I want to go back to always is the black selection arrow. So I'm going to click on that, and this will allow me to adjust the frame. Okay, so it seemed like nothing really happened there, but I just made the frame the entire size of the printable space. And I'm going to drag it out there to my spine of my book, right? And then the other lines were representing where the printer would actually be able to print to, and so I dragged it to that as well. Okay, so I have that frame covering the whole printable area on this document. Okay, so that's just the frame, but now I want to double click so I can get inside and be actually adjusting the texture file. Okay, since it's a vector file, I can actually resize it without holding shift. That's something that's allowable. I can, though, hold shift if I want to, and it'll just end up cutting off anything that goes out beyond the frame. Okay, and so since it has this VecDZ logo in it, I'm actually going to shift and drag it out so that it goes past that, so that doesn't show up. And so there I have made the actual image inside of the frame larger. And I can tell that I'm editing the image because it's a kind of a gold line. The frame is a blue line, all right? And if I want to select off of that picture, I can click over into the gray space. That's one way to do it. And so now I have this texture behind my file, okay? And that is also making it so that my text here, this is sort of a side note, my text is really hard to read. So what are some things that I could do to make that text pop a little bit more? All right, so I'll tell you a few things right now, and then we'll also talk about a few more things when we get into object styles later on in today's tutorial. So one of the things that I could do is I could actually just create a colored rectangle. So I click on the rectangle tool over here, and then I can click and drag out a rectangle. Right now it does not have any fill. I can tell that up here because it has a red slashy line here. So if I click on this, it'll actually let me select a color. And when I press OK, then it applies that color to it. Again, how I got to that was double click on this square here, the fill, and then I picked a color, and I can drag all around and get different colors. Okay. Again, the layer order is not correct. All right. I can tell which layer I'm selected on because there's a little blue square next to it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag that rectangle so that it's just above the texture layer, right? Because I don't want it underneath the texture layer, then I won't be able to see it. And then I'm going to press the black arrow and then select nothing, and now I can see how that's all laying out. And so that looks pretty good. I would maybe want to bump this up a tad so that my words, and now I kind of like how it's centered in here, so I don't want to just like, I'm pressing my arrow key once I select it. I'm pressing my arrow key to bump it up and down, just the arrow keys on my keyboard. But if I want to actually move this text layer and that rectangle that I just made together, if I hold the shift key, it'll let me select both items, and then I can use my arrow key to bump it up. So I'm selecting the gray, clicking on the gray to select nothing, and then using my arrow key to bump it down. So what I'm trying to do is put that text over top of just the colored image, but I kind of like the way that it's overlapping this, and this was sort of randomly selected, but this color scheme is working quite well together with the browns and the blues. So that is how you can add a texture layer and how you can add a rectangle behind text in order to make the text legible if the texture layer does not, or makes the text so it's not legible. The next two things I'm going to show you is how you can rotate an individual text box, and then how you can rotate your whole spread. You would want to rotate your whole spread if you wanted a book that was, the spine was on top and it was long and narrow. And maybe it'll make more sense what I'm suggesting with that once we do it. But this is a book that the spine is on the, when you have the book all closed, the spine is on the left-hand side. But if you want to make a book where when it's all closed, the spine is on the top and everything is kind of long and skinny, that's another option in InDesign as well. So two types of rotation, rotating just the text box and then rotating the whole spread so that you could design a book. So you don't have to design it sideways, basically. So if you wanted, sometimes it's fun looking to have text go vertically instead of horizontally across the page. So like maybe the main title is read horizontally, but then the subtext could be vertical and somewhere else. And actually, since I want this text box to stay together with this rectangle that I've created, I'm actually going to shift click, but it still works if you don't do that, but shift click so that I have both rectangles selected. And now that I have them both selected, if I drag my cursor out to one of the corners, and it doesn't matter which one, but I want to get it to the point where I see this arrow that has two, it's a double-sided arrow and it's curved. The curved double-sided arrow means rotate. And then I can just click and rotate that box. Now right now I'm just free rotating it back and forth, but if I hold my shift key, it'll actually only let me go to 45 and 90 degrees. So again, I'm still holding the clicker on my mouse right now, and I'm holding my shift key in order to get it to do this, okay? And then I want to let go of my mouse before I let go of the shift key on my keyboard, and then I can click and drag to reposition these items around my page. And so maybe that would be kind of, I mean, obviously someone would have to turn their head in order to read it, but it can create an interesting design element. All right. So I'm just pressing Command Z a bunch of times to get it back to its original location. And now I'm going to try it again with just the repetition box. So I'm selecting that, Again, I'm in the black arrow here, selecting that box. I'm holding my mouse until I see that double-sided arrow. I'm holding my shift key and I'm clicking my mouse at the same time while I rotate this box. Okay, and I'm trying to find a place where I can put it where it looks good design-wise, but it's also legible, okay? Because half the battle with design is making sure that it both looks good and you can read it, right? Both things are super important, right? So what I just did there is I shift-clicked so I could select both things, and I'm moving that up a little bit using the arrow keys on my keyboard, okay? It's becoming a little bit harder to read as it crosses over into the image here. I might want to do something later that I'll talk about later called a drop shadow or an inner glow, and that might help to pop the letters a little bit and make them a little bit easier to read. So that's how you rotate text boxes. And then the way that you rotate a spread is actually through a drop-down menu. Okay, so you want to select the spreads. So we're going to have to go back to the Pages menu here, and I'm going to click on page 2 and then shift select page 3. Actually, I'm going to select page 1 and then shift select page 3. So now I have 1, 2, and 3 selected. Okay, and so then what I'm going to do is go to View, Rotate Spread, and then 90 degrees. And in my case, I'm going to do 90 degrees clockwise just because of the way the word repetition is located. And now you'll see that it rotated that whole spread. But it didn't change how it looks in my pages, it just put these little arrows over here. Okay? And so then that would be if I wanted to design my book to all be oriented this way, and then my front cover would actually look like this, and it would all be sideways. Okay? So you get the staples in the same spot up at the top, but the whole book looks like it's sideways. So if that's something you're interested in, that's how you can do that. The next part that I'm going to talk about is how to use color swatches. Because whenever you create a document in InDesign, you always want to create a folder that contains all the colors that you used in that document, so that I make sure that when I use a blue on one page, I'm using the same blue on the next page, and not one that's just slightly different. Okay? Distinctly different tends to be okay. It's when something is almost the same but not quite the same that it becomes a problem. And so using color swatches ensures that you will have consistent color throughout your document. Okay, so there's two places I'm going to need to click in order to see what I'm doing here when I'm creating a color swatch. Alright, so over on the right hand side, you want to click on swatches so you can actually see all of these colors. And you should see these same colors as I have because these are just the ones that are default set. And then the other place I want to click is over on the left hand side. I'm going to double click on this square right here, which will then open up my color picker tool. And so I can pick any number of colors that I would use in my document. Okay, so maybe I want to have some kind of like neon green that I use. And so I would drag this. I'm just clicking and dragging my mouse to drag this around. I can also drag this to get some different hues in there as well. And then I can click Add CMYK Swatch. Alright, and then you'll actually see that color show up at the bottom of your color picker, or in your swatch over here. Okay, and so I actually want to create a folder though that these all go into, and so at the bottom of my swatches panel here, I can see that there's a little folder icon. Oh, it looks like it won't let me create it while I have the color picker open. So I'm actually going to press cancel, and now I'm going to make a new folder, and I'm going to call it book, and then click OK. Alright, And then I'm going to click and drag that green into that folder. It looks like it put 2 copies of that green in there, so I'm just going to delete the other one and press. Oops. So it looked like it was actually applying a color to this because I had that selected while I was doing all this. So whenever you start playing around in colors, you want to make sure you don't have anything selected on your document because it's actually going to change the look of your document without you really realizing it. Okay, and so what I'm going to want to do here is double click, or no, click on this little arrow here and click none. So it goes back to the way it was before. Okay, now I'm going to select nothing and I'm going to go down here and I'm going to delete it. And now it doesn't care that I delete it. Before it was like, whoa, wait, you made something that color. What color do you want it to be if you're going to delete that swatch then? And so that's how I knew that something was wrong. Okay, so I'm just clicking on these. So right now I'm going to highlight this folder that I made. And now I'm going to just click on nothing on my screen. So I just clicked once on gray. And then I'm going to double click on this square again. And now I can drag around. Now I'm like, oh, I want a blue. Oh wait, I already have a blue. So how can I make sure to put that blue into my folder? Well, there's a little eyedropper tool right here on your color picker. You have to make sure that you can visually see the color that you want to pick on your screen in order for this to work. But if you click and hold down your mouse, I'm still holding down my mouse right now, and I'm dragging around my screen, you can see it's jumping all over the place because it's trying to figure out what color I want to grab from my document. Okay. You can even grab colors off of your desktop too, so it doesn't have to be just in Illustrator, so that's kind of cool. You can also grab colors from your photos, which can be very helpful in creating a design that visually coheres together, is to grab colors that actually are from your photograph. Okay. Sometimes it depends on where in the color you choose, so sometimes you have to see there's a bunch of different pinks in here, so I can kind of pick around which one I want, and sort of this medium one is good. Alright, so now it's got that here. I'm going to add that CMYK swatch. Because I had that folder highlighted over here in my swatches, it actually adds that swatch right to that folder. Okay, so I'm going to use that pink at some point to create a nice visual tie-in to my image. Okay, the other color I want to grab is actually this blue here, so I'm clicking. I click on the eyedropper, I drag, and I'm still holding down my clicker on my mouse, and I let go once my mouse is over top of the color I want, and then add CMYK swatch. Okay, so now I have these 3 nice colors, and that's enough. Alright, that's enough for now. So I have these 3 colors. These are the only colors that I'm going to be using in my document. And actually, technically, I would also want to get the color off of this, so you know the steps that you can go through in order to get this color in there as well. Okay, so on your document I should see 4 colors here, which also include whatever color you used for your rectangle. Okay, so that's how you can create color swatches to create visual unity throughout your document. Of this tutorial, before you'll actually save this document again, and I'll want to see all of these things that I've showed you how to do evidenced in your document when you resubmit it for this next tutorial grade. But the last thing we're going to talk about is object styles. And object styles are different ways to adjust the frames. Okay, so if I wanted to have all of my frames so every time I had a title frame, I wanted to have black fill in the remaining space besides where the words are. That would be something I could do in object styles. And again, it's so that you could quickly apply, if you use an object style for the repetition rectangle, then I can also apply it to the line rectangle. The other thing that I can do, and there's actually tons of stuff that you can do using object styles, but the other thing I'm going to talk about specifically is how you can create drop shadows and outer glows. And like I mentioned earlier, this will help you to make your letters pop so that your word is more legible. So what I'm going to do is I'm in my black arrow here, and I'm going to select the frame that the word repetition is located in. And then I'm going to make sure that I can see object styles over here. Mine was default set to be on top. It might be under effects, but I can click on it so I can see that dialog box here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a new style, all right, just like I would in the paragraph styles. And then I'm going to select that style and click on the text, and I'm going to type in title, because this is going to be for my title boxes like repetition or line. And then I'm going to double click on it, and that will give me all these different options, just like when you double clicked on the words for your character styles or your paragraph styles. Okay, and so I have all these different options. So I have my fill, right? If I change that to blue, then it'll change the background to blue like I talked about. It looks a little weird though because my word is actually on the top instead of in the middle. So I could either make my frame smaller so that the box is just smaller so it doesn't look weird, or in object styles I can actually change where the text locates within that frame. Okay, so what I'm going to show you now is how you can relocate that text to be centered. And what you're going to want to do under basic attributes, you're going to want to click on text frame general options, and then you're going to want to select, instead of top, center. And then you'll see that it'll bounce to the center of that box. Okay, so that might be something you want, particularly if you're using a fill. If you're not using a fill and the background is just blank, then it's not going to matter as much. So the other thing that you can do is you can add an outer glow or a drop shadow. Okay, so those options are both here. So pick which one you want to try. I'm going to do outer glow. That just glows around the whole thing, whereas a drop shadow tends to only be located on like the left bottom side of each letter. Okay, so outer glow, and then I'm going to bump it up. But see, what's happening now is it's actually putting an outer glow, and I can see that it's putting an outer glow on this whole box instead of just my letters. All right, so I'm going to actually go back to my fill, and I'm going to change it to none, which then the outer glow bounces to be applied to just the letters within it. So if you wanted something where you had a colored rectangle and an outer glow, you would have to do something like we did here, where you actually create a separate rectangle and then put the outer glow into the font, because it can't recognize the edge of the font when it's got a fill color applied to it. Okay, so I'm going to go back to outer glow because it's not quite dense enough to really cause the contrast that I need. So I can bump up the opacity a little bit is one way that I could do that. I could also try adjusting some of these settings. So that made it a little bit darker. I could also put normal as the blending mode here. Also, outer glows do not have to be white. You could make them black, for example, if you needed it to be a little bit darker around the outside. Okay, and so how I got to that is I just clicked on this little square here. All my swatches opened up, and I can choose a color from my swatches, right? So that's kind of nice. That actually does help it, that green does help it kind of pop a little bit from the background, all right? So I can decrease the size. Maybe I decided maybe it's a little too big, so I went back down to 1 or 0.125. You can also play with some of these other settings. So this helps kind of increase the density closer to the letter. I could add noise, which might actually be visually nice just because of this kind of weird texture that I use in the background sort of looks pixelated. And so then the noise sort of makes it look pixelated here. So that does create kind of a nice visual continuity there. So I'm actually going to leave that. And then I'm going to click OK. And so now I've got that word that's a lot easier to read because the background around it is a little bit more the same, as opposed to having this like picture and then the texture, which made it harder to read. Okay, so now I did all that work, and now, just like with my paragraph styles, I can actually select this word line, and over in object styles here, it's just saying it's a basic text frame. That just means that nothing has been done. And I'm going to click on title, and see now it bumps it to the center and it adds that outer glow around it. Okay. It might get a little overwhelming if I did this through my whole book, so maybe I want to have like 3 different object styles that have maybe different colors or something like that, that I'm using throughout my document instead of the same one each time. It might get a little redundant if I do that. But it's kind of nice to have at least 2 of them match up, especially because these are going to be on a spread where the page is visible. Both pages are visible at the same time. Okay, and so that's how you do object styles. So if you could save this document, you're going to go to File, Save As, and you're going to make sure your document is named last name underscore first name underscore 01 underscore ID dash B. And then you're going to click Save. And then you're also going to go to File, Export. And then you're going to make sure the format is Adobe PDF print and click Save. And then you're going to, in the next window under Adobe PDF preset, you're going to go to High Quality Print. Make sure that that's set. And then just click on Export. And then that should have, I would have also wanted to double check where it was saving it to. But since I didn't check, it's just going to save it to the place where the other file was located, which was on my flash drive. So then I can go to my flash drive and I can find that PDF here. And then I can upload that file to the 01 Workshops ID-B folder. Okay, so I can put that into the drive in our turn-in class folder in the 01 Workshops ID-A folder. And then you can get credit for having completed the assignments. The way that I can edit this file in Illustrator, I can do so in a way that'll give it a little bit more of a smooth transition from the texture to where the page of the book is going to be, by making it so that the edge is more jagged as opposed to just a straight line. So if that's something that you're interested in trying, I'd recommend trying it just for the tutorial, but you may or may not want to do this for your final. You could just have placed this document without editing it directly into your file. Sometimes though there's little watermarks on it that you can even delete in Illustrator. And what I need to be in when I'm in Illustrator is the white arrow. When I first opened this document, I tried to select things with the white arrow, but it still selected everything. And it wasn't selecting the edge of the, like I clicked along here, and it's not actually selecting any of these points in here, which tells me that something is wrong. And so what I can do, I have to kind of be a detective here to figure out how this file was constructed. Sometimes when you pull things off of the internet, it seems really easy, but then you do have to kind of figure out how it was constructed so that you can edit it to your liking. And so since I dragged out that white arrow and it didn't really select anything, I know that something's up. So if I open this, then I can see, oh, this layer was actually locked. And so if I unlock that layer, then I'll be able to click and drag out. And now see, it's able to select all of those different vector points that are in there. The other thing that's happening though is it's seeming to select all of this. Like if I press delete, a lot of that goes away. There was a background color in here that went away too. So I'll press Command Z to undo that. And if I look here, I can see, oh yeah, there's a whole rectangle here. And there's this other kind of gradient rectangle I can click and move around and see what that does. I'm just pressing Command Z to get it back into place. So I could actually lock that layer and lock the other layer. And now if I click and drag across the top, it's only going to select this top part. And when I press delete, it's not deleting that background color. And so I can do that around all of the edges so that the edges are a little bit more rough and it'll be more of a smooth transition from the texture to the paper. I can also delete that watermark there. I switched back to the black arrow in order to delete the watermark. But now I need to switch back to the white arrow because I didn't grab this edge yet. Maybe I don't like that gradient. I can just delete that out. And maybe I don't even like that box behind it. So I can decide on that. I'll leave it in for now. All right, so that's how you can kind of play detective to figure out what's in your document and delete some of the stuff that you don't want. And then you can go to File, Save, and make sure that it's being saved in the same place as your InDesign file because you don't want the two to lose track of each other. Remember, it's just a linked file. And so then we can go back here and I have my original version. I'm just going to delete that out. And I'm going to, then I can place this new document that I've edited in Illustrator into my InDesign file.